Hello, in this video I'll show you how to use activation properties here in Rigid component. First of all, I want to remind you about simulation types. So first, simulation type here, as you remember, is dynamic object. Simulation type, when you start simulate dynamic object, they simply falls down, they're affected by gravity. The next one is sleeping, and it works in the same way. You just only need to touch one of them, and they will again turn to the full dynamic object. And as you can see, this simulation type, they do not support activation because activation basically is turning object to dynamic. And since they are already dynamic, there is no need to activate them. Activation can be used only for inactive simulation type or for kinematic. So these two simulation types you can turn to dynamic objects using activation. Here's my simple setup. As you can see, it's just a root with a bunch of fragments here. And object type set to mesh root, so I will not need to select every plank here to change properties. I can have just one rigid component on the root, and all these properties will be transferred to these planks. So when I start play mode, you can see all of them get their own rigid component with the same properties, except that object type set to mesh. First of all, let me show you this inactive simulation type. And this rock will be kinematic. So kinematic objects are objects that can be moved around. They cannot be affected by physics. They can only push other dynamic objects. Kinematic object cannot push another kinematic object. So kinematic object only purpose is to push other dynamic objects or inactive, or be like this ground is something, so something will fall to this kinematic ground object. Start play mode. This time my fans are set to inactive, and as you can see, inactive object can be pushed, but they do not turn to dynamic object like sleeping object. So they kind of something middle between kinematic and dynamic object. You can push them using another inactive object or dynamic object, as you can see. So they can be pushed by, they do not fall to the ground, they are not affected by gravity. In some cases, it might be enough for you, but if you will just push them too much, it will start looking weird. And this is when you should start to use activation properties. The same activation properties in the same way work for kinematic object as well, but I will show you how to use activation using this inactive simulation type. Also, there's this public method in rigid component. You should just type get rigid component and then use activate method. So in this way, you can activate your inactive or kinematic object in your code whenever you want. Just use activate method. And as you can see, any inactive or kinematic object can be turned to dynamic object. First, activation type is activation by offset, and it allows you to activate object if they were moved far enough from their original position. This original position is saved when you initialize your rigid component. So let me set here maybe 0.25 units and start play mode. Now you can see I can start pushing this object, and I pushed them a little bit. They are not activated yet, but if I will push them more, you can see now they start to turn into dynamic object. So this is how activation by offset works. This is the simplest way to activate your inactive or kinematic objects. And it works in the same way for my kinematic object as well. You can see I can set here maybe 1 unit, and it will be activated in the same way. So my kinematic object, I can move it. And when I move it far enough, it turns to dynamic object. So in this way, you can kind of use one object as kinematic, so it will push other dynamic object, but at certain moment, when it will go too far, it will be turned to dynamic object. Also, you can see there's this local toggle here. It also works for activation by offset. And in this case, you can see I have only one object, but here I have this mesh root set up. And if I will let me set enable play mode. You can see if I will start and move this root far enough, all of these planks will be activated because I moved all of them from their initial position. So if you want to move whole structure around the scene, maybe it linked to some movable platform, you can enable this local checkbox. In this case, if object will be moved far enough relative to its parent here, it will be activated like this plank. But if you move whole structure itself, you can see it doesn't activate because right now you enable this local toggle checkbox. So this is how activation by offset works. Another way to activate your inactive or kinematic object is to use Activator, and Activator is basically just an empty game object with Rayfire Activator component. You can find it here, and it allows you to use Collider as a trigger to initiate activation of your inactive or kinematic objects. So in this case, there is this default sphere or box collider, but you also can use your own custom collider as trigger. In this case, you should add it here. I will use the sphere one. There are a bunch of properties here. I will show how to use all of them in special Rayfire Activator component tutorial. But for now, just an overview of activation type here. So in this case, I'm using the sphere, and it works in a pretty simple way. You just need to touch one of these fragments. As you can see now, it doesn't work because I forgot to enable here activation by Activator here. So don't forget to do this. And now if I will touch my fragments using this collider trigger, you can see it start activating them. Again, pretty straightforward work. If you want to use some kind of collider as a trigger to initiate activation, you can use Activator component. Don't forget to enable Activator here. Another activation type here is gun impact. So you can use Rayfire gun component to shoot your objects and to activate them as well. So you can see there's this group of impact properties here, which allows you to dynamically push objects when you shoot them. Again, there will be special tutorial for Rayfire gun component. For now, just a quick overview of how you can use it to activate your objects. So here's my second column. As you can see, it's dynamic. So I can start shooting. And this is how impact works. Let me disable this impact radius. So you can see it's shooting, always shooting for testing purposes. So this is how impact works. As you can see, it simply dynamically shoot every time and kind of creates little explosions. But this time you can see I'm shooting this column and well, nothing happens because for this column I didn't enable this gun impact activation. So let me enable it this time. Start play mode. Start shooting. You can see it shoot this dynamic object. Now it starts shooting this inactive object and activate them as well. So this is how gun impact can be used to activate your inactive or kinematic objects here in this activation properties here. Another way to activate your objects is to use Rayfire bomb component. And this activation type is not represented in this activation list here because bomb component basically can activate even a not rigid component object, but any simulated object. So it has its own this activation properties here. You need to enable activation using bomb here in active or kinematic here. It works pretty straightforward. You just need to enable these properties and then use explode button or explode method in your code. Just to create this bomb, set its radius, strength, and explode it. That's all. You can see it explodes inactive objects. If you will not enable it here, then it will not affect rigid component with inactive simulation type. Nothing will happen here. So other object will be exploded. If you have other dynamic object with rigid body, they should not have rigid component. Any object with rigid body and colliders will be exploded. So this is why it has its own activation properties. If you have rigid component with inactive or kinematic simulation type, and you want them to activate and turn to dynamic, don't forget to enable these two properties in the bomb, and then it will be exploded. Another way to activate object is use this damage property here. So there's this damage group of properties in Rayfire Rigid, and it is mostly used to demolish object because it allows you to collect this virtual value of damage, which can be dealt by Rayfire gun, Rayfire bomb, or by collision. So let's say by default you can smash your object over the ground and demolish them, but if collision strength will not be enough, then object will not be demolished. So you can smash your object like hundreds of times. Every time if collision will not be high enough, object will not be demolished. But using damage, you can kind of collect every collision and increase its current damage. So when it will reach this max damage, object will be demolished. In the same way, you can use damage to activate objects. So let's say you can have max damage at 100, but damage activation damage will be at 50. So when object will get 50 damage, it will be activated, and then when it will get 100 damage, it will be demolished. So this is how the system works. I will use this gun. Let me use this gun. You can see in gun there's this damage property here. Right now it's 30. So you can have like small firearms with low damage and some assault rifles with higher damage. So you will need different amount of shots to activate some object using damage or demolish it. So right now I'm using this 30. I will need 2 shots so it will become bigger than 50 damage here. Let me start play mode. And I will shoot this plank on the left. I will make one single shot. Here you can see I will select it. You can see its current damage is right now at 30. For this one it's 0 still. For this left one it's 30. So this object already got its damage here, but it's still not enough to be activated here because it's I set here 50. So I will make another shot. And now you can see the subject was activated and turned to dynamic. It just didn't fall because it's too steady here. And it just don't want to fall. Well, but I can start shooting. Maybe I can shoot another one here. Make another 2 shots. Now you can see it also was activated. And the same for this one. First shot added this 30 damage. Another shot, now this object activated. Again, I can increase its damage to maybe 60, and it will be enough, just one shot, to activate this object. And in the same way, you can use bomb. It also had this damage here, apply damage value here. So just position it so it will be all objects, some of the object will be in range. And again, I can use big enough value just to activate them all at once, maybe 60 here, or maybe actually even 70. And then click explode. You can see these two were activated. My explosion strength is not enough right now. But this one, its damage right now is 32 because it's too far from the center of explosion. So every time I exploded it, it added some damage. But this damage depends on how close or how far object from explosion center. So the subject still not doesn't have enough current damage to be activated. So maybe I need to explode it again. Now it's 48, still not enough. Well, let's explode it one more time. Okay, now it's got enough damage. So this is how activation by damage works. You can use gun, bomb, or collision. Again, you can see it's possible to collect every collision and add it as a damage to current damage value using this multiplier value here. And the last activation type is by connectivity activation. First, I will show you how I use this gun impact to activate your object to show you when you may need to use connectivity. As you remember, when I used this gun impact, I made a shot, and there were a big group of fragments here that stayed frozen in the air. So this is how you can fix this using this connectivity activation. First of all, you need to enable connectivity here. So then you need to add Rayfire connectivity component. Again, there will be a special tutorial about just how to use Rayfire connectivity. For now, just quick overview of how it can be used. And now another important component here is unyielding component that will define the area that should be considered as unyielding. Usually it's at the bottom. Right now, if I will start play mode, you can see I just used default properties. I didn't change anything. This is just default properties. You can see there's this green lines that shows you connection among these fragments, and there's this red lines that shows you connections among unyielding component. This time, when I will make a shot, I will activate this group of fragments here, and after every shot, all fragments will check for connections with this red area here, with these unyielding fragments, and all fragments that are not connected with red area will be activated. Let me make a shot. You see, this time this column was clusterized and activated. And again, you can disable this activation, this clusterization in connectivity component. Just disable clusterize. Take a shot. This time all fragments just simulate separately. So this is how you can use this connectivity to activate whatever should not stay frozen there. You can see to fix these fragments here, I can use offset activation by offset, or I can change my connectivity from bounding box, which is not correct, but the fastest one, to by polygons, which is more accurate. In this case, more fragments will be considered as neighbors. And maybe let me increase my offset. Select this. And again, just another shot. You see, now it looks much better this time. So this is how you can use connectivity to activate your fragments. There's a bunch of properties here, like unyielding. It's mostly to be used with single object. Right now, I'm using this mesh root component. But again, this is properties you may need to tweak when you use connectivity with unyielding setup. So that will be I will show you how and when you should use them in special connectivity tutorial. And the last property here is post-activation. This is change layer property. So by default, when you activate the object, nothing happens. They still keep their layer. But for some reason, in some cases, you may need to change their layers. So to do so, we need to enable this change layer property. Pick here some other layer. So you can see right now this object has layer default. And now I'm moving it. It activated and it changed to this water layer. So this is how you can, in case you need, you can change a layer of your activated objects.